SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Latino America, bringing together the leadership teams and product specialists from retail and online operators in Latin American markets.
Discover the potential of Latin America's booming iGaming and sports betting markets at SBC Summit Latin America, the premier industry event in the region. Join SBC at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami from October 31st to November the 2nd. Register now at sbcevents.com.
Few sporting evolutions have been as rapid as the one seen in combat sports in recent years, from the surge of new sports and martial arts to the rise of crossover boxing. Like it or not, the face of the fight game is changing. I'm Martyn Elliott, and welcome to today's iGaming Daily in partnership with SBC Summit Latino America. I'm delighted to be joined today to discuss the changing face of combat sports by Joe Streeter, editor of Insider Sport, and also by Callum Williams, business journalist, also working on Insider Sport. How are you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing good, thank you. Midweek, raring to go. Excited for this podcast. A really interesting episode, a really interesting discussion we're set to have today.
Yeah, and I know this is a subject close to your heart, Joe, as a lapsed pugilist, I believe. If you're going to be talking up your own boxing career as we go through
this. The way the game has changed, fancy myself to get back involved. I feel like I could beat a few of those guys on that card in Manchester on Saturday night. So if any of the Paul brothers are listening, then I'll meet you in Manchester. We'll get it on if you want to.
Well, an interesting offer to start the show with there. So.
I have a gum shield. I will travel. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. And how are you doing, Callum? I know you're bringing a bit of the social media expertise that people of my generation really don't have when it comes to this crossover boxing.
I'm not as quite open as Joe is for anything for a payday, but I'm not. It's as rainy as it is outside of Manchester. I'm sure it'll be KSI will be raining tears on Saturday as well, because I think he's going to get beat very convincingly. Yeah,
I do have some questions about the validity of a fella from YouTube fighting a guy who is, before his Love Island fame, already a professional boxer and quite a skilled operator as well. So I'm not sure about that as a sporting contest, but we'll get onto that a bit later. So what we're going to explore a bit today is the opportunity for betting operators that's coming from the changes that we've seen in both boxing and MMA, and the opportunities around new markets, and is it an opportunity to engage with a new sort of younger audience who perhaps aren't sports fans at the moment, perhaps aren't sports bettors, definitely. So, Joe, perhaps you could just start by telling us a little bit about how combat sports have changed in recent years, and also this fight in Manchester at the weekend. How big is it, and what does it mean for betting operators?
Yeah, I mean, this Misfits card on the name of the promotion on Saturday night is really the tip of the iceberg as to how combat sports have changed. I mean, we've now, obviously, mixed martial arts has really changed the game. It's changed the whole calendar. Whereas sort of 30, 40 years ago, there was a boxing match on a Saturday, once every 2 weeks that would capture the attention. The calendar has just evolved massively, and now we have martial arts fights every Saturday. I mean, last Saturday we had two big martial arts promotions from the US in sort of late night. We had a couple of world title boxing fights in the UK at Saturday prime time. And obviously what that means from a betting perspective is there's just more content. There's more opportunity to engage punters. And it really has, it's evolved massively. And I think obviously the UFC is at the forefront of that, the impact they've had on the fight game. And when you get a promotion like that, that really pursues ahead, brings more events, is innovative with the way they bring events as well. They pack the card from start to finish. So from sort of fight number 1 to fight number 10, you're watching good, engaging fights with a lot of betting opportunities. When somebody does that, it forces the rest of the market to push up. And we've seen boxing promotions now have had to improve what they do based on just how much it has improved. I mean, even last night it was the final episode of the series of Dana White's Contender Series, but Tuesday night fights, it's not something that is the norm, but it just shows how the calendar is accelerating and is growing, and that is only good news for betting operators and bettors as well, because it means they can engage with action year round and also week round. The other side of this, obviously, is what we have Saturday, which is a far newer prospect, but is interesting nonetheless. And as much as it's not my particular cup of tea, it's getting eyeballs, it's getting bums on seats. People are engaged in it, and I think it speaks to the potential of it, that it's probably us three sat around here are all fight fans. You know, we all watch boxing. We all watched Canelo Crawford 2 Saturdays ago, but we aren't necessarily engaged with the KSI, Tommy Fury, Dylan Dennis, Logan Paul, Misfits card on Saturday. I think what that says is this is bringing a new audience to the fight game. And whilst they're not necessarily bettors yet, whilst I don't think these people are as engaged in, or this audience is as engaged in betting as your traditional boxing fan is, there's certainly an opportunity there.
And what about you, Callum? What have you noticed about the changes? Because I know you're a big fight fan, like your UFC and various types of MMA as well.
Yeah, I agree with Joe said, really. I mean, in terms of the whole calendar and the whole, the UFC's kind of got their own market now alongside boxing, and it's just really exploded. You tend to, I know the UFC tended to have a couple of fight weeks per month. Now it's every single week almost, and the same really with boxing now. This, influencer boxing card on Saturday, which has been going on now for quite a few years, it's definitely bringing new eyeballs to the sport. I'm not really sure if they're in it for the long term when it comes to boxing, or they're just invested in this influencer type boxing sport, if you would call it a sport. But no, it's definitely bringing new eyeballs to boxing in a sense. So and then when it comes to the operator's perspective, I know Stake, they're like one of the main sponsors of the Misfit boxing promotion, so they're just going to get a load of eyeballs onto them as well. And as people just continue to see the Stake logo and it's the Stake, the presence of Stake on these boxing cards, then it's going to get them more notoriety, I believe. Sure.
And one thing I don't want to overlook too much is the growth of women's boxing and both MMA as well. So Ronda Rousey, obviously the catalyst for what we're seeing now with people like Katie Taylor, Chantal Cameron, and so on. Drawing huge numbers on their broadcasts, and I understand also generating some action for bookmakers on those fight cards as well. So
yeah, and subsequently, I think potentially drawing a new audience as well, because with women's sport, we get a new audience, and that has. Again, the UFC set the standard on that one with Ronda Rousey, as you mentioned, but subsequently the likes of Valentina Shevchenko and Amanda Nunes. And this happened naturally. It happened organically through the hard work of these combatants, and they now headline pay-per-views. And off the back of that, maybe not necessarily off the back of that, but following that, we've had Katie Taylor headlining pay-per-views. We've had Natasha Jonas headlining big cards, and we've had women boxing really take centre stage as well. So yeah, you're exactly right with that point. And the other point as well here is, as Callum mentioned, the calendar expanding. We've also seen it expanding geographically. I think the latest magazine I write about how operators can use martial arts and can use combat sports to expand into Latin America, where there's a passionate combat sports fan base. And it's something that mixed martial arts has done well. We see events in Australia, we see events in the Middle East, across the globe, and it really is a global product now as well.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Joe's point there as well, I mean, just to kind of put into context how still new mixed martial arts is that it was only in 2015, I believe, or 2016 that New York lifted the ban on mixed martial arts, which is kind of, crazy to think about. It was only that long ago. And even the same case goes for, I know the UFC have put on a few shows now in Paris, but they had one in a couple of weeks back. And they've only recently as well, over the past couple of years, lifted the ban on mixed martial arts as well. So it's just kind of goes to show how new this still is to many different markets, not just age demographics and such, but different territories and different markets as well.
Sure. So turning a little bit our attention to the card on Saturday night in Manchester with KSI, who I believe you're both more familiar with than I am, against Tommy Fury. I can say I'm looking forward to John Fury's antics at the weigh-in, whatever they're going to be, but probably more so than the fight itself. But I'm interested in what this means for betting operators, really, and the opportunity. So just some stats from a slightly different event. There was a charity football game last month for the Teenage Cancer Trust where it's effectively two teams of famous streamers from YouTube. Apparently it was the Sidemen versus the YouTube All-Stars. They attracted 62,000 people to the stadium to watch this. And there were 2.7 million people watching it on live stream and a further 17 million people in the 24 hours afterwards watching reruns of it. Now that is huge. And no one was watching that for the standard of the football. They were watching it because of the celebrity appeal of these people. And, that is also the draw for this weekend, really. It's about the celebrity, not about the sport. And DAZN can expect some pretty tasty numbers on their pay-per-view, I'm sure. But I'm not sure what you think, Callum. What do you think operators can do to, I suppose, profit from that, to maximise the potential and really bring in a new audience?
Yeah, well, I think you said it quite well there, Martin, that I think also what operators are doing now, they're looking at these audiences that some of these streamers and influencers have, and they're massive audiences. And crypto casino operators in particular, they've also ventured into the social media / influencer space via gaming streamers on platforms such as Kick and Rumble. I know Roobet and Stake have been marketing their products through these streamers on those platforms. So along with, they also come with a lot of kind of younger audiences as well sometimes. So, there've been calls for gambling to be stopped on these streaming platforms. And, I think the largest streaming platform is Twitch, and they decided to ban all gambling content on those sites. So there's still some boundaries there in between marketing the type of gambling content on those streaming sites. But I believe there's nothing wrong really with what Stake and these betting firms are doing, attaching to the influencer cards like the one on Saturday. They should maybe also come with some maybe more gambling awareness promotion in particular. But no, I think the general consensus is that these audiences are tuning into people like KSI and Jake Paul, Logan Paul, because they carry a brand, they carry a personality that people are just invested in and want to see, to be honest.
Yeah. We mentioned the brand and the fan base they carry. This is not just any fan base. It's first worth noting that, you mentioned the pay-per-view numbers for DAZN that this is going to do. What's significant about those pay-per-view numbers is it's dipping into a new pool of consumers. It's not going to be, the people that watched Lee Wood versus Josh Warrington on Saturday night, sort of the same. It's a similar demographic to the group that watched Canelo Alvarez against Charlo the week before. It's dipping into the same pool there. But then you cross over to this Misfits stuff, And it's a completely new demographic who are just, it's engaging a whole new audience. But betting operators, I think there is, they do need to be careful because it is a younger audience. But I do think largely it's sort of 18 to 25-year-olds. I don't think it's an underage audience. And I think, but you do need to be careful there for sure. But, and when we talk about that fan base as well, Callum mentioned, being associated to the Logan Pauls and the KSIs of the world, that carries such good commercial value because as we saw with the Prime drinks that were launched by Logan Paul and KSI, the fierce loyalty that these fans have to these athletes. I use the term athletes like, let's go athletes or YouTubers. It's unwavering. They're paying excessive amounts for energy drinks just because they see these guys drinking them. So when it comes to having their brand, having a betting brand plastered on them, that loyalty can be replicated for sure. In terms of what operators can do, that's going to be less lucrative than partnering with one of these combatants, because it's going to cost a lot for sure. But in terms of what they can do aside from that, I think one of the things is content. Content is always king, and that's, whether it's reacting to press conferences. I mean, everything these guys do draws massive numbers, whether it's John Fury throwing a table at a press conference or KSI going on Good Morning Britain and giving a speech as if he's an anime character and he's going to defeat Tommy Fury. Everything these guys draws huge numbers. So if you can piggyback off that and have, streamers, lesser known that are reacting, have betting preview content, that type of stuff, it's only going to elevate engagement for operators. The other thing I think is very simple, and it sort of tails off the back of that, because when this content is coming out, there's not necessarily stuff to bet on at the press conference. But what there is they need to make sure they have props and have pricing early. Don't wait until fight week to have the odds for, or all your props or your round betting for this stuff to be up. Have it up early. So then when you see Salt Pappy training on TikTok and you think, that's good stuff, he's really looking sharp, I think he's gonna do the business in round 4. Have that available, so you can. It's at least there to be bet on, and the betting action can be engaged with right up until fight day, because that's important, because these events aren't just the Saturday night at the arena. They're a run up until the event. These guys mastered the art of engaging content, so piggyback off the back of that.
Sure. And the one thing which I have a slight concern about here is the audience for these social media stars. They're loyal to particular stars, and what these guys have done amazingly well, which I wouldn't have said was possible 5 years ago, is evolve what they offer as their audience has got older, and people continue to buy into that in a way, which means they probably wouldn't watch a world title fight next week, but they will watch this boxing. So for operators, is this almost like the Grand National for a new generation? It's just people who will bet on this day, on this fight, because it's their favourite YouTube celebrity, but probably won't watch another boxing match, might not even watch sport the rest of the time?
Well, to a degree, right? But this is obviously a bigger event than most of these crossover boxing events. But the crossover boxing events are no longer an annual thing. They're not a one-off thing. They're semi-regular in the calendar. And, you mentioned things like the Sidemen charity match last week. They're obviously going to stick around for that. There's going to be lesser. I think there was a Misfits event from Newcastle 2 or 3 weeks ago, which featured somebody from Geordie Shore getting pummeled by an ex Love Island guy. All very entertaining stuff. but they're going to stick around for that. All these faces are people they recognize, and the KSI brand is also associated with them because he's so intertwined with Misfits. So as much as this is, like you say, the Grand National or the Super Bowl of crossover boxing, there are events. It doesn't mean they're one-time users and then they're gone. There are events that will keep them engaged, even if that isn't. So I think gone is the myth that this brings a new audience to the sport of boxing as a whole. The vast majority of these fans aren't sticking around to watch Katie Taylor in 2 weeks' time. They're going to watch influencer boxing, and that's about it. But that influencer boxing now is a regular feature on the calendar. So if you can draw in eyes for that and have that as a prospect, I think that's a positive thing. And also the Premier League. I know it sounds silly, but the Premier League, everybody watches the Premier League. If you can keep them as sort of Premier League bettors, that also holds value, I guess.
Yeah, I think the real question for the operators is when they're looking at this, the activity on the fight night on Saturday, how can they bring that audience over to boxing? Because boxing is happening every week. There's always a high profile fight or a high profile card near enough every single week. And I think that would be a real question for operators to ask themselves: how can we bring this new audience and migrate them over to boxing or to MMA? And it does. And this one does feel like the biggest Misfits influencer card maybe to date. So it could also potentially grow into a whole new different life, or the shelf life on this influencer boxing could also be very, very short. It could also flame out. I know the KSI and Jake Paul thing that's still like the next big fight to happen, but maybe after that, what is the next big fight to happen in this type of space? So it could also be a short shelf life.
Do you think that's at all possible? Like I remember when much of the justification for the first or the second KSI Logan Paul fight was they had sort of world title fights. I remember Billy Joe Saunders was on the undercard. And they were saying like, this is such good exposure for Billy Joe Saunders. He's going to get all these new fans. But largely, they're not trying to watch a 12 3-minute round fight for the WBC title in the lightweight division or the middleweight division that is two boxers actually boxing. Do you think there's ever a world where this leads to more fans for the sport of boxing and more bettors for the sport of boxing? Or do you think they stick in their lane and stick to crossover boxing?
Yeah, it's tough to be honest, Joe, because I think when me and you growing up as box fans, we grew up on like Ricky Hatton, Floyd Mayweather, proper, true to dedicated to the sport type fights that we all grew up watching. This has only really been happening over the last several years, and so you've got a younger audience growing up with these influencers that you, like you said, have got a very fanatic and will support them through and throughout. The question remains then, when they stop doing this influencer type boxing, will they then start following boxing in its purest form, and the likes of Canelo and Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk? I don't really believe they will, to be honest, because they're attached to these influencers, these figures, and it's not really. Of course, they're not really. I don't believe they're going in for the boxing. I believe they want their guy to beat this other guy, and then once it's done, they can go about watching other content from them online.
I guess the other side of that coin is what you're seeing from traditional boxing. You're seeing outside the ring, a lot of fighters learn from influencer boxing and the need to bring some of that persona, whether it's on social media, whether it's at press conferences, and then they're not just buying into the guy that throws vicious body shots. They're also buying into the guy that a different demographic is buying into the guy that has a great Netflix show, like talking Tyson Fury there, but that brings a whole new audience to the fighters as well. So yeah, something to be learned from both aspects, I guess.
There's not actually that much difference between these guys and how they build their audience on social media and what Ricky Hatton, Man of the People, everyone in that Ricky Hatton fan base felt like they knew him personally, whether they'd met him or not. And boxers have traditionally been pretty good at that side of things anyway, in terms of promoting themselves through the press. Interesting to see if they can do it through streaming platforms, social media, and so on more effectively there.
I mean, Conor McGregor's the biggest example of all of these, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's prize fighting, right? It's character driven. It's how many people you can get in the seats and draw pay-per-view numbers, and then you've got to back it up in the end. But that it's a business ultimately. So I think that's one thing the influencers are doing really well, to be fair, is they're getting people invested in whatever they're doing.
Yeah, that's right. So if we can perhaps turn away a little from the influencer boxing, and I think we just need to focus a bit more on MMA with this next section. Are there any operators out there that you think, Callum, are doing a really good job with promoting their MMA offer and bringing in that new audience?
Yeah, I'm not sure in terms of if they're doing a good job or not, but I know the UFC have really, really doubled down on betting partners and betting sponsorships. I know over the last few years they've made partnerships with BetClick, with Stake, with ProHibet, with Bet365. So you can see that they're really diving into the betting and gambling sectors as well. I mean, as well, they're founded and based in Las Vegas, so they've got a lot of ties, especially Dana White as well. I know he has as well. So no, they've really put their name in that type of market. But in terms of branching out to new audiences, I'm not too well versed in how they're doing there, Joe. Maybe.
Well, I think largely I mentioned it before, but content is key, and I think because as a fight fan, you don't have the fights end on Saturday, and I know I mentioned the Tuesday night fights before, but that's sort of a new prospect that's not a regular feature. Largely speaking, from Sunday up until the following Friday, there is no content. There are no fights to be watching. So if you can keep the audience engaged, whether you're talking about fights, podcasting, previewing the upcoming Saturday's event, if you can keep the audience engaged Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it's a hungry audience, they want to be engaged, they want to be thinking about their sport through the week, then you're doing something right. And I think the one that does that really well is DraftKings, for sure. DraftKings in the US obviously has the partnership with the UFC. I think they do a good job of previewing stuff, breaking stuff down, and generally just getting the appetite building for next Saturday's event. I think they do a good job of that. The other one, and forgive me, Martyn, I know you wanted to take it away from influencer boxing, but Callum mentioned Stake before as well. They have great partnerships with UFC fighters. But I know you wanted to take it away from influencer boxing, but I will say the one that really benefits, because Misfits is on DAZN, the exposure DAZN bet gets is phenomenal. It's through the roof when it comes to Misfits boxing and influencer boxing. They really benefit from having the eyes. They're going to be this. We mentioned just how big this event is on Saturday. They're going to have the DAZN bet brand. Even if it's through adverts on the pay-per-view, they're going to be plastered all over that. And yeah, there's a lot of value to be held in that for sure. But from the UFC perspective and the MMA perspective, I think DraftKings definitely up there. And also Roobet, another one that we see do really good things, do some really engaging content, and also benefit from brand partnerships with athletes as well.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed Matt Dewar, who was one of the co-founders of Roobet quite recently, and he told me, MMA really important, although it's largely a casino rather than a sports book. They have a sports book arm, but he's saying that the audience of people who are interested in crypto and like to play in crypto, they really get on board with anything that is they can see as being slightly disruptive. As in MMA has come in and really disrupted the boxing world and the combat sports world, UFC in particular. And I would guess that that mindset carries on to the influencer boxing. You're not watching stuff on traditional television. You're not reading newspapers and so on. You're coming at it in a disruptive way to the media as a whole. So I think they can see those audiences there. And as you pointed out, they've done loads of content now with the people on with MMA fighters, Brandon Moreno, Marlon Vera. And they also have Canelo Alvarez as a brand ambassador.
It's fascinating.
It is, yeah. I mean, if you've got Snoop Dogg and Canelo and a load of MMA fighters, that's a broad offering for your marketing.
I think another thing to be said about the content for these brands as well is, we're no knock on footballers at all, but they're a little bit limited in what they can do. But when it comes to, combat sports athletes, you don't go into combat sports unless you're a character, unless you're wired a little bit differently. And the guys you mentioned there, Chito Vera, Brandon Moreno, they're wacky guys. They're interesting guys. I'll watch them do anything. If they're on a podcast, I'll watch it because they're fascinating. I know Brandon Moreno, his big thing is he loves Lego. Just a wacky dude. So all the content is going to be engaging just because it has these characters in it.
Yeah, they kind of almost market themselves really for the operators that they work with. So yeah, it's very interesting as well to that point you made as well there, Martyn, about how the whole these card on Saturdays kind of like this like crescendo of disruptive forces coming together, with the streaming, crypto, non-traditional finance, and also other things like social media influencers as well over the natural boxers. So it's kind of really this new age, modern type of event we're looking at on Saturday.
It is the prime card as well. And I don't think anything's been as disruptive as, I don't want to plug a energy drink that doesn't need it at all, but nothing has been as disruptive as Prime. I mean, just a fast growing drink like that was really crazy takeoff. And that this is the Prime card. So it speaks more to your point that, disruption is key.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm off to watch a podcast in which a MMA fighter builds something out of Lego. And I hope you'll join us again tomorrow for another episode of iGaming Daily.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Latino America, being held at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami on the 31st of October to the 2nd of November. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network. Happy reading.